promoting the free exchange of ideas, questioning the status quo, and having some fun along the way. This is the Are We Idiots Show. Now here are your hosts, Mark Weaver and Rich Kroll.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Are We Idiots Show. We are your hosts, as always, Richard Kroll and Marcus Weaver.
Marcus Weaver, top of the evening to you. It's a balmy, soupy week in northeastern United States, and I tend to wear black shirts a lot this time of year.
Where did that come in?
So I don't show the sweat.
Oh, okay. I thought it was so you get more sweat, because doesn't black attract more
Well, yes,
heat?
it makes me hotter, but you can't see the sweat.
You might want to adjust that and start wearing white, right? Or no? What is there another color in between that? It doesn't attract
You know
heat?
what? You just gave me a great idea. White's a better choice.
So, welcome to the show, everyone, and we have a great show planned. And this show is loosely related to the conversation we had 2 shows ago when we talked about whether or not there was a higher power involved in creating our universe and everything in it. So this show, our main topic on this show was loosely based on that. We've actually talked about doing a show on religion and declining religious values as well. So that's what we're going to talk about today. First, we're going to talk about Idiots of the Week. And not talk about it, we're going to nominate some. Then we're going to say, Losing My Religion, not a reference to REM, which is a good song.
Very good song.
But that's the Losing My Religion topic. And then we're going to close the show with idiotic religious practices. And there are plenty.
These might be the scariest ones of any show we've done.
Yeah, there are some really strange practices. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm not far be it from me
you're
to
not
make fun of
judging.
anyone's religion, but there are some wackos out there.
You never judge people.
So let's get started, Richie. Idiots of the Week. What say you?
All right, I got a couple interesting ones here. Let's start with in Ohio.
Oh, that is funny.
Isn't that hilarious? Now, this one could be the judge or the prosecuted man here. You're going to tell me.
Okay.
An Ohio judge, fed up with the interruptions of this plaintiff, is it?
Okay.
Ordered a convicted robber's mouth to be duct taped, say that 3 times fast, duct taped shut in court. Franklin Williams, who was convicted of 3 armed robberies, had multiple outbursts during his sentencing, despite receiving more than a dozen warnings from Judge John Russo. Williams was convicted in December on counts of aggravated robbery, kidnapping, theft, misuse of credit cards, and having weapons under a disability, whatever that is. On Tuesday, he was sentenced to 24 years in prison after his second trial. During the first, Williams pleaded guilty and was sentenced up to 14 years. He was granted an appeal after the court found he was misinformed about when he would be eligible for parole. While on temporary release, he cut off his home arrest ankle bracelet and committed another armed robbery. Video captured by the station inside the Cayuga County Common Pleas Court shows Williams loudly complaining about his attorneys before Judge Russo interjects, saying, "Mr. Williams, I'm the judge in the matter. Shut your mouth, and I will tell you when you can talk. If we have to, I will gag you in 1 second, zip it until I give you a chance to talk." When Williams continued to defy the judge's orders, Russo ordered his mouth taped shut. However, one piece wasn't enough of red tape. It proved ineffective. So after Williams continued to try to speak, the judge instructed deputies to place another piece of tape over his mouth. Now, the key thing for this, and where I got the chuckle, afterwards, Williams told a reporter that he would be humiliated if his children and family saw how his freedom of speech was violated. Not that he's robbing people and kidnapping them and credit card fraud.
No, they'd be proud of that, the
Right.
kids. Wow. But this is going to be hard for me because there's nothing I hate more than people in power abusing their power. And if this judge wasn't an egomaniac, this is my first reaction right off the cuff. If this judge was an egomaniac and tried to belittle this guy, he just would have declared him in contempt of court and the bailiffs would have taken him away. That's the way a normal, humble judge would do it. So I'm leaning towards the judge for taping his mouth over to try to, be bigger than him. Yeah, it just doesn't sound right to me.
I could have almost combined these into be, the two nominees in one.
Right. Yeah, they're both idiots for sure. But my inclination is that I would say the judge is the more of the idiot because he's supposed to be the adult in the room, so to speak.
This is dueling idiots on two polar opposites of the courtroom.
But you still have another nominee.
I have yet another. Illinois State Representative Nick Sauer has resigned from his post after ex-girlfriend claimed that he used her nude photographs on an Instagram account in an effort to catfish men. Sauer, a first-time Republican who also serves on a task force to combat sexual harassment,
oh my goodness,
sent a letter to the Illinois House of Representatives acting clerk saying he's quitting as a result of the allegations by Kate Kelly, a former girlfriend. I have decided to resign my office for the 51st District in the Illinois General Assembly. My ability to fulfill my obligations as a state representative and public servant will be affected by the distraction of addressing these allegations. In a complaint Kelly filed with the state's office, she said Sauer lured men who believed they were communicating with me into graphic conversations of sexual nature. Kelly says a man she did not know reached out to her on her personal Instagram account to say he'd been communicating with her for 4 months, but he finally figured out it was someone else other than her. After that, she had her Instagram account disabled. She talked to Sauer about it. Sauer allegedly admitted to everything. He came to my household, confessed to catfishing men with my photos for 2 years to at least 8 men. He was unable to provide the names and begged that I let it go. Sauer and Kelly could not be immediately reached for comment. So this whole catfishing for men, I can picture is the redneck.
But he wasn't, the way I'm understanding this, he wasn't gay. He liked to talk to men about lusting after women. Is that what I'm hearing?
No,
here?
He liked to get men to talk to him like he was a hot woman with his nude pictures.
Okay.
So these guys thought he was a girl.
Okay.
So he must have. So there is a weird,
yeah,
multi-sexual facet to this.
But the reason he resigned was he couldn't fulfill the.
Correct.
It wasn't because he couldn't catfish any longer because he was busted.
Yeah, and for those viewers or listeners that don't know what catfishing is, if you know that there's a redneck reality show where they literally, the guys go out in canoes and they put their arms in the lake.
Of catfishing, right?
And the catfish, these huge, like 50-pound catfish, and they have teeth imprints all over their arms, right? So that's another story.
Yeah. But yeah, catfishing in the social media realm is pretending you're someone you're not.
And the beauty is he's on the task force for sexual harassment as well.
That's probably the first politician ever that I've heard of that's been a hypocrite.
It's maybe the second for me.
Oh, there might have been one other, yeah. But that never happens where a politician is a hypocrite.
You love politicians.
All right, so this is hard, Rich, because I hate judges that embarrass plaintiffs and defendants.
That are also idiots.
Defendants, I guess. And then I also hate hypocritical politicians. So I would say I'm going to go, since we never have nominated a judge for Idiot of the Week, I think we're going to go with the judge this week for taping a guy's mouth to try to belittle him instead of just declaring contempt of court. So that is my ruling. Judge Weaver.
There you
Judge
go.
Weaver rules that the judge is guilty.
You'll send the $1 this week?
I will. I'm kind of flush, so I'm going to send $1. Okay, so we're going to move on to what I'll term losing my religion. And the reason this came up is we've talked about doing a show on various religions, but we thought we'd start at a higher level and talk about why the U.S., following the lead of Western Europe, is rapidly, I'll say rapidly, becoming a less religious nation. As you know, Rich, this country was founded by religious Protestants, namely, and this was a predominantly Protestant country, and it's certainly a predominantly Christian country. It used to be, in 2003, 83%. We're going to throw around a lot of statistics here at the beginning of this segment, listeners, but 83% of the U.S. Identified as Christian in 2003. And by 2017, that had dropped 11 points, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that's a
No, that's
relatively
significant.
short period of time. And let me just give the listeners some background as to the demographic. So, in that 14-year span, Catholics have stayed pretty steady. And the rationale behind that is that there's been a big increase in the Hispanic population in our southern states, and Hispanics are predominantly Catholic. About 50% of all Hispanics identify as Catholic. So that's the reason these demographers say that the Catholics have stayed relatively even though the Protestant faiths have gone down a lot. The Protestant faiths or denominations, that have gone down a lot are really the old mainline type Protestant denominations. So Methodists, Presbyterians, Lutherans, Episcopalians, they've really been the ones that have dropped off. So-called evangelicals or born-again Protestant denominations have largely stayed even like the Catholic denominations. And we can get into some of the other they're not lesser religions, but they're less percentage. There's obviously a lot of other faiths out there, Jehovah's Witness, Judaism, Muslim. They're all a much lower
Hindu,
percentage.
Buddhist, they all believe in a higher power.
Right, but they're all in the extreme minority in the U.S.
In the U.S., yes.
Right. So let's talk about why this is alarming for us to do a show on. And the stat that really jumped out at me, and I'd like your feedback on it, is there's about 20, depending on what survey you talk about, anywhere from 20 to 24% of the nation now refers to themselves of having no religious affiliation whatsoever. So atheists, agnostics, and people that don't have any religious belief at all. That's huge. And of that group, the largest group is young people. So 35% of that group is adults between 18 and 29. So you can see that if that's the case, either those people are going to come back around when they get older, which I guess is possible, or this nation is really headed even further down the road of being a much more secular nation. So what's your thoughts about that, and why do you think that's happening?
Well, and I know we like to blame a lot on millennials and progressives and the left wing, but the reality is, over the last couple of decades, there is less of a hierarchical discipline system. Right? I remember we grew up and, gosh, we respected the older kids. The older kids respected their parents. Parents respected the teachers. Teachers respected the police. Police respected the government. You could walk down the street, leave your doors open, windows open. Times have changed. And as they seem to change as people get more, quote, educated.
Right. Yeah, that's one of the things that's a theory that a lot of people have, is that as there's a correlation with educational attainment and lessening religiosity. Is that the right?
Religiosity.
Yeah, religiosity.
If it's not a word, it should be.
I think it is. But that is a very common theory, because if you look at Western Europe, the Enlightenment, ever since the Middle Ages, really they've led with Enlightenment, and you could say they're 50 or 60 or 70 years ahead of us in some of their social aspects and social outlook towards religion. And they're certainly much more secular than we are at this point. So do you prescribe to that theory that the more educated you are, the less you believe in a higher power because it's a stretch to believe in something you can't prove? Is that the idea?
I think it's a twofold issue. I think, one, people that think they're smart and people that follow science and biology and physics are typically people that need to see empirical evidence. You got to prove it to me.
Right.
You can't prove God, obviously.
Right.
So for those types of people, they almost get too smart for themselves. As we discussed in that previous show about creationism or an intelligent designer, science and religion can go hand in hand and actually help explain each other better in some respects. So I say quote more educated, because it doesn't necessarily mean if you're smarter, you can't believe in religion or a higher power. But I do see that trend. And then typically what happens as more and more people are now in college, if you looked at the statistics, who's attending colleges and universities today versus 50 years ago, 30 years ago, much, much broader, higher percentage. And in these schools, a lot of liberal schools,
Right.
they like to get kids thinking about challenging the status quo, which this show is about.
Right.
And does things make sense or not? And religion on a lot of levels doesn't make sense to the common man. You have to think outside the box.
Right. Yeah. And look, obviously, in almost all major religion, it has the excuse of religion has been used for great atrocities. So if you wanna point blame at religion for some pretty awful things, you can find it, right? So, and again, I'm not saying. To me, all that points to is the infallibility and the awfulness of humans, not the religion itself. It's people who distort and co-opt the religion for their own evil purposes. So, I think that is also something that you could have never-ending ammunition against religion if you wanted to, indoctrinate these college kids. So I think that's true.
Well, I also, listen, we're not going to sit here and tell anyone what to believe, right? You and I have our beliefs, and they're very similar. So this is not about comparing atheism or agnosticism to Christianity or any other religion. But, I do think that education and liberal mindset also leads to misinterpretations, right? It doesn't necessarily mean if you can't prove it, it's not true. There's a lot of things we can't prove, but they're in our books that we, how exactly the universe is expanding. A lot of things at the molecular level, we can't prove them. They're still theories. Even Einstein, right? We agree, the smartest guy ever. It's the theory of relativity. You can't prove it, yet we're teaching it as if it's statement.
Right.
Fact.
Right. Yeah, and let's face it, religion is not just on a intellectual level, it's an experiential level. You know what I mean? So I would even say that religion, your faith, not religion, your faith is largely more experiential than intellectual. Don't you think? At most faiths?
I think it has to be.
Right.
Because
you can't prove the existence of
you
God,
can't
for one.
prove it. It's
right.
God, whether in any religion, even some of the ones you said, although they're statistically low percentage in the U.S., they're the majority in Asia, India,
right?
The Eastern world, they have a higher power, and it's based on different types of belief systems. But again, they can't prove it either. So, yeah, it's experience. It's what you decide to research. If you look at religion at a very skim the surface level, it doesn't even make sense to me. But depending on the level you want to dive in and uncover things and read and research, I don't think a lot of folks are doing that today. They're just taking Professor Wojciechowicz in philosophy says this, and it's true.
Okay, so I have another thought on this topic, but before we leave the whole educational correlation to losing religion, do you think that changes at all, or do you think that continues? If more and more folks go to college, and by the way, in 2 weeks we're going to have a show on the problem with the college degree, but we won't go into that now. But let's assume that there is going to be a lot of people still going to college. Do you think the colleges will ever change, or you think there's going to be pushback to this liberal or leftist thinking and more secular ideas about things?
I mean, based on statistics and trends, I would think it gets worse. They've eliminated, all prayer from schools. They've eliminated the Pledge of Allegiance. Everybody's got to be opaque. It's just so reconstituted and centralized in a way that it's offensive. So I think it's going to continue to get worse. The only thing that would change, and there's been waves throughout history where religion goes up and down depending on certain things or certain people that promote it, so I would think it continues to get worse before it gets better.
And the last thing I'll say on this subject is, if you look at what's happened in Europe, there can be some backlashes to secularism. In France, for instance, there's no preference for religion, and it's not supposed to be in the public arena at all. But lots of religions have cultural practices. And in France, they've actually banned the burqa, covering your face in public, because it's a public threat. And I think that's a really slippery slope. When you ban a religious practice at a national government level, under the guise of being secular, and it's saying it's a cultural threat.
Yeah, the whole separation of church and state dilemma, right? But I also think the way the ebbs and flows come from individuals. Just a quick example. Call it the Calvary Baptist Church, not too far from we are. 30 years ago, just started pretty small. Now it's 10,000 members. Or even my church started with 10, 15 people moving from Ohio, and now we're 1,000 people. So if you have very gregarious and popular type folks that are down to earth, magnetic personalities, much like yourself, all of a sudden you can grow a particular faith and change people's beliefs. So it can go both ways, but for now, I think as a norm, it's going downhill overall.
All right, so quick thought on my other theory, which is that as material wealth increases, you will, when I say you, not you, but people,
not me personally,
people will be less reliant on faith.
Absolutely correct.
Which I think is also contributing to why Western Europe and the United States, which are the wealthiest regions on earth, I think that also has a lot to do with it. People...
And I can explain it.
Okay, go for it.
And this is without any research, I can explain this. So as we become more wealthy in general, it leads to more complex lifestyles. So when religion was very prevalent, right? Like you said, early settlers, early United States primarily believed in a higher power. They had simple lives. You got up, there was, at the break of dawn.
You worked till dusk.
And you relied on hope and faith, and there was no televisions and Led Zeppelin concerts and Philadelphia Eagles games.
Well, there was no crop reports. There was no weather forecasts. You had no idea.
There was no high top Adidas Kobe Bryant sneakers. I mean, so over hundreds of years, think how complex. You even said, I walked in today, oh my God, I'm having a crazy week. Right? And we're busy 20 hours a day with a million things, and our lives are so cluttered that we're trying to focus on to take care of our families. It really distracts from religion.
Yeah, and if you're comfortable, I think there's a tendency to not appreciate, that there is a bigger picture to all that. If you believe in such a thing, that there is a bigger picture to this, and there are more important things. But you're focused on, your own comfort. I think
you get so overwhelmed with managing your toys and keeping the house painted and the roof on, and the shore house or the vacation, or you have to get a car for your kid, or whatever the case may be. Keeping up with work, the weekly, monthly pressure of work just to keep your job, it gets very difficult at times to find space for religion that was a huge part of people's lives 50, 100, 200 years ago.
Okay, so then we'll wrap up the segment with talking about if you believe that a lot of Judeo-Christian values that this country was founded on were based off, a lot of natural rights and such like that. Do you believe that there's going to be a long-term effect to this if our country continues down this road? The human interaction, if there's no values underneath that, do you believe that is going to degrade to a point where, interaction as we know it is different amongst humans. It may not happen in our lifetime, but our grandkids' lifetime. Do you think there won't be some underlying values to society?
Again, absolutely. If you have a value system that promotes, being a good person, treating everybody as an equal, loving your enemies, not being sexually promiscuous, not being a drunk, not being a bully, then if that's your belief system and you adhere to it, I think that makes for more
a better society.
Better society. I've watched even just sexual promiscuity over the last 30 years. The stories I've heard with younger and younger people, and just there's no delineation between that's private and that's special, and anything goes.
Well, look at Tinder. Tinder actually, wherever the parent company to Tinder, Match or whatever, they had record blowout earnings because of Tinder. And basically, Tinder is, you just swipe through and you hook up and you go have sex. Doesn't happen all the time, but that's what it does, and it's like shooting fish in a barrel. It's just, crazy to people of our age, but evidently that's quite the norm.
Well, I will say this, and I have some atheist friends that are really good people. They're just as moral and ethical as I am.
Right. There's a difference between morals and religion. Let's be clear.
Be clear.
Yeah.
But I would say as society becomes less adherent to religious values, that it's easier to be a maniac or a nut job or not give a crap about anything that leads to societal problems. So yes, and yes.
Okay. And then the last thing I'll say is on the political front. I like politics a lot.
You love politics.
And, I'm a big advocate for a third party, becoming more relevant in our society.
That wouldn't be the libertarians, would it?
If it happens to be the libertarians, I want to fight for the libertarian principles. It happens to be the Libertarian Party. If it happens to be maybe there's a Republican that's a libertarian, that's okay too. But I thought it's interesting when I looked at the last election. 80% of white evangelicals voted for Trump, which is a little bit confounding to me. And 67% of those who claim no religious affiliation whatsoever voted for Hillary. So, as most people know, there's a lot more Democrats in our society or progressives or leftists in our society than there are conservatives or Republicans. So that's another trend, which I think relates to this religious discussion, is that you would think that over time, conservatives / Republicans / even moderates are going to be lapped by the field here, because it seems like this country's going way more leftist, way more progressive, and way less religious. So it could have political ramifications as well.
Well, but let's be fair. This past election was an anomaly. We had two of the worst character presidential nominees we've ever had. You're choosing Trump, who I'm not going to make any comments about his policies. I'm 50-50. I think some are great, some stink. But you're comparing Trump to Hillary, who most people said, I don't like either person's character as a person. So right. I don't know we can.
Yeah, but I mean, the next election is going to be Trump. And, at this point, we don't know if it's going to be Bernie Sanders or someone else. I had to bring up Bernie.
You had to fit
pretty
Bernie
much every
there.
show. But, he's not exactly, a religious person either. So I don't know. I think that there may be some correlation to progressive values and what we talked about earlier in the colleges and no religion. And I think, maybe that will overtake the value system of our political leaders as well. So we have something to watch.
Their value systems are already
well, yeah. Trump has broken down that. When we used to think Bill Clinton was, kind of on the lacking in values, and Trump takes him to a whole new level.
Bill's now a choir boy.
Okay, so we're gonna conclude the show with some idiotic religious practices.
There can't be any.
There really isn't, and again, we're not judging. Well, maybe we are judging some religions, but we'll feel like we'll just point out some of the crazier ones around the globe. So the Agori, Rich, is considered to be a religious cult that broke away from the overarching Hindu religion in the 14th century AD. In Hindu mythology, it is believed that everything emanates from Brahman, or Brahman, I think
Is
that's
that a noodle?
it's ramen.
Oh, that's ramen.
This is a B. And that no evil exists. Agori followers take this interpretation further by believing that everything is God and to abandon anything is sacrilege. You follow me so far?
So far.
Yeah. This belief manifests itself into crude rituals, particularly their practice of dwelling near cremation grounds and eating the corpses of the deceased.
What? That's, I was wondering what that group was when I drove by the cemetery the other day and they had McDonald's bags. I don't know what, okay, that explains it.
So, honey, I'd like to teach you about our family's religion, and we're going to go over to the crematorium today
And
and eat lunch.
Uncle Myron just to make
mean-
things right.
I mean, come on. Give me a break.
Yeah, you can judge that one.
All right. Staying in India, the Krishneshwar temple in India state of Maharashtra is the site of a very unusual and potentially dangerous religious ritual. As the name suggests, I don't know that. But basically, babies between the ages of 1 and 2 are thrown from a 50-foot tower with men positioned beneath to catch the babies on sheets. This 700-year-old ceremony is believed to make the children more intelligent, luckier, that'll give them, and healthier, and is practiced by both Muslims and Hindus in the region. So you could take your 1 or 2-year-old kid to the top of a 50-foot tower, and the village guys are standing underneath it with a sheet.
Well, at least they're not using catcher's mitts.
I'm almost speechless. When I read that, it's like outside of a fire, the men all get out and say, jump, jump, jump. But this is on purpose.
If you were wondering
you're
where
1 or
some of-
2-year-old little baby.
If you were wondering where some of our X Games contestants come from, it's these 1 and 2-year-olds that are flying through the air.
Unbelievable.
You can judge that one as well.
Here's a sports-oriented religion, Rich. You probably never heard about. Named and created after the legendary soccer player Maradona, the Maradona Church is an ode to him. The church simply believes that Maradona was the greatest soccer player in history and in the history of the sport, and praise to that effect. They also have a set of commandments, including changing your middle name to Diego, his name, naming your son Diego, and spreading the news of Diego's miracles.
Where do I join?
To date, there are 80,000 followers
No way.
in 60 countries.
I thought you were going to say there were 80,000.
80,000 followers in over 60 countries.
What is wrong with
The
people?
Maradonian Church.
And what do you get
And
for...
they showed when the article showed a picture of this portrait of Maradona.
Do they actually have weekly services? And
I don't know. They're spreading the word.
Is there prayers?
And praying to the fact that he was the best ever.
Wow. Our Maradona, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name.
Those Argentines, man, they're creative. I got to give them that. All right, this is a gross
You can judge that one as well.
This is a gross out warning for our listeners. In medieval times, the wider population essentially scorned lepers. However, it was common practice for female saints to care for those affected by licking the pus from their wounds and eating their scabs.
What?
This was seen as a sign of extreme holiness.
That's one way to look at it.
I don't even want to go there.
Can't
but-
even repeat that.
Yeah, but I did give a gross out warning.
Is that worse than eating your dead uncle? The other religion?
Well, I don't know. I think either of them I'd rather be dead myself. So I guess
if it doesn't
that
kill
answers
you,
your question.
yes.
All right, last one.
All right.
Self-flagellation. Always a popular thing in history. It began as a form of penance by
Flagellation or
flagellation. What did I say? Flagellation. What did I say?
Oh, I thought you meant when you whip yourself.
Yeah, it is. It's self-flagellation.
Versus farting.
Yeah, not flatulence, not
that's-
flatulence.
I thought, okay.
Self-flagellation. All right. Form of penance by radicals in the Catholic Church. You know, you ex-Catholics, you're crazy. Zealots would lash themselves in public as a demonstration of piety. Great processions, some with 10,000 participants, passed through cities with crosses and banners, beating themselves with leather thongs while chanting hymns and calling forth other zealots. So I had no idea. I guess I haven't looked into religious history that much, but self-flagellation, Rich. Not flatulence.
Oh, I prefer self-flagellation.
Well, you
It's
do
a
that.
lot
You do that in the studio here. I have to leave sometimes.
Yeah, it's a lot less painful.
Any thoughts on that before we?
Well, there was a scene in the Da Vinci Code where the tall, bald, maniac, like Christian zealot, flagellated himself, and that's the first time I was introduced to it.
It's just, that's what I'm saying. Like sometimes religion gets a bad rap, and other times religious people
Deserves it.
deserves it. So, okay, so we're going to conclude the show. We have some vacation time coming up next week, so we're going to do another All Idiots of the Week show next week.
By the way, it seems to be you the only one going on vacation all the time.
Well, we won't go into that, Rich, but I might be going on vacation, yes. And then in 2 weeks, as I hinted at earlier, we will question the current value of a college degree. And is it truly a learning experience, or is it just an expensive signal to potential employers? And we'll talk about that and some of the college debt. It's $1.5 trillion now, so we'll talk about the problem that's creating with our families. And as always, please remember, if what you see or hear sounds idiotic, then we're just the guys to help you sort it out. See you all next week. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Are We Idiots Show. Please subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher so you can enjoy all episodes.